man. Come on, man. You got people hanging out in lawn chairs in front of buildings, smoking weed, open containers. Y'all do nothing, and y'all in that parking lot. So you know what happens? If I'm at the 7-Eleven, if I'm in front of your building, in a lawn chair, selling drugs openly, right? If I'm there from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., I'm not looking for no job. I don't have a job. But you know who see me? My enemies. My enemies see me all day. So you know what the enemies do? Oh, he gonna be there all day. I come back over there and shoot him. Then I gotta shoot him and her. Because they never get their enemies. They get some kid or they get some old lady. So I ain't mean to rile you up, but like I said, I skip overtime for this. Y'all gonna answer my question today.
Commander Branch wants to respond after the chairman responds, so just to let you all know.
Okay, well, let me see. These are not easy questions because these are not easy problems. They're not. They're just not. And they're problems that we've been dealing with for decades, and it doesn't mean we can't be doing better. You know, 10 years ago, when I stepped down from chair of the Judiciary Committee, there were 88 homicides. Last year, there were 226. So we can do better. There's no question we can do better. Now, I have to say with regard to crime, I agree with the commander when the commander says, you know, the goal here is not to be arresting people. And there are a lot of low-level offenses where really the person shouldn't be arrested for sure. The goal, we don't want to be incarcerating the person. But, and I take some chances saying this, but you know, I think that the liberal council has gotten a little bit too easy on some of these issues, so that the police are sometimes unwilling to stop somebody because just the message is that that's not what we're going to do, and I think that's a mistake. We want the police to be involved with these quality of life issues. The commander's right, we don't want to be arresting people, we don't need folks to have criminal records, but we do need to be clear that, you know, we need order in our society. There are some strategies that we as a government, I shouldn't say we because that suggests me, I disagree with what the government has done in slacking off on some of these strategies. One of them is focusing much more on, I'm going to pull up a phrase from the past, community policing. And community policing, in my view, is focusing on building trust. Commander sort of alluded to this when he said, the police need you. I saw this recently where I live. There was a homicide in a rec field across the street. And it was some guys who were playing flag football, I think it was flag, and they got into an argument. And they argued through the whole game, and then for reasons that just boggle my mind, one of them decided to settle the argument by getting a gun and shooting the other guy 11 times. The issue here is not that it was 11 times. The issue is that these were folks who were playing sports with each other on teams. And yet when the police came and interviewed people, nobody knew who it was. I don't believe that for a moment. But what I do believe is that those folks didn't trust the police to come forward and be witnesses. The police have got to build community trust, community policing. But also, there needs to be more focus, in my view, and this isn't the commander, this is the whole department, as well as all the other criminal justice agencies, focusing on the known violent offenders. There are about 300 of them in the city, maybe a little bit more. They commit these violent crimes repeatedly. They either commit the crime or they're the victim of the crime. We see this over and over again. We need to be more focused on those folks. It's a strategy called focused deterrence. We also, this is again, I'm going to softly criticize my colleagues over the last couple of years where we weren't as strong in getting resources to MPD as we need to be. MPD needs the resources to close cases, but focusing on closing cases. Last year, roughly 50% of the homicides that were committed last year were not solved last year. Roughly 75% of the robberies that were committed last year were not solved last year. And yet so much of crime is repeat offenders. So just focusing on closing cases can make a difference. And better coordination between the law enforcement agencies, and that includes the U.S. Attorney, because in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Attorney is one who prosecutes violent crime. And what I see too often, and there isn't enough public awareness of this, is that the U.S. Attorney makes decisions that actually, in the long term, do not help us in terms of these violent offenders being kept off the street. With the U.S. Attorney, when they have somebody before them who has been a suspect in multiple homicides, the U.S. Attorney should be doing everything possible to make sure that person is held pending trial, not released. And the U.S. Attorney should be doing everything possible to ensure that they get a conviction, and a conviction for a felony, and not just for a felony, but for murder, if that's what it is. Instead of what we see over and over again. You remember the South Capitol Street massacre 10 years ago? That all started with a guy named Sanquon Carter, who was arrested. He was arrested a year and a half earlier for possession with intent to distribute. It's a felony, but it's a low-level offense. He was released. He didn't show up in court. Because he didn't show up in court, when he was arrested that fall for armed carjacking, the court wouldn't release him. He was held. That's a good thing. But his attorney, which is what a defense attorney should do, was constantly going back into court saying, please release him. And at some point, the U.S. attorney reduced the charges from armed carjacking. And then he was released. And he went to a party that night. He was supposed to get a bracelet Monday, not Friday. Friday night, he went to a party. He thought somebody stole his gold bracelet. I don't know if it was a real gold bracelet, but he thought somebody stole it. And he pumped, I think it was 20 rounds into Jordan Howe, who was sitting in a car. And then that led to retaliation against Sanquon's brother, who then had to retaliate by renting a van and shooting 10 kids on South Capitol Street. If the U.S. Attorney if the U.S. Attorney had not reduced those charges, it's just to illustrate the point that the U.S. Attorney is an important player in this. And we really don't see what happens with the U.S. Attorney in their charging decisions. Do you remember a couple of months ago there were some dogs that were stolen? I don't want to suggest that's an important offense. But the police, there was a lot of news about it, the police arrested somebody that day. The U.S. Attorney didn't prosecute, dropped the charges. We need the U.S. Attorney to be aggressive with these violent offenders, and I think that will make a difference as well. Those are just some of the strategies. I went on longer than I wanted to about that, but thank you. Jamil?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep this real brief, guys. First of all, I love that man's passion. I love your passion. That's why I'm still here. Trust me, I could be home tired right now. I don't need to do this. But people like that is why I'm here. Love that passion. Everything you said is absolutely correct. 100% correct. But the thing we have to remember is the one word, is accountability. I hold myself accountable. I hold my officers accountable. We need to hold each other accountable. We are a system, and if we do our part and other people don't do their part, the system is broken. As far as going back and forth, it's his fault, that fault, whatever the case may be, we are all in this together. That means everyone in this room, all the citizens. Like I said, police should not be arresting and solving all society's issues. That's not what we're here for. We're here to help with people who are sociopaths, people who just refuse to abide by the law, want to do what they want to do, and we have to sit them down. That's society's part. We have to raise our people and our children the right way. Years ago, it was perfectly acceptable for me to go hit a woman. I'm talking about caveman days and drag her off. We don't do that anymore. That's not part of society. But the thing about it is we have to have these rules. We have to hold people accountable. That's everybody included. As far as what you say we're doing, 526 guns right now. We got 490 last year. That's what we're doing. We got numbers to prove what we're doing. We're actively getting these weapons off the street. We have to hold other agencies accountable and have them put these people where they need to be. They shouldn't be having to get gun after gun after gun. And you want to talk about the police? Yes, they're demoralized. I will tell you right now, it's been a tough couple of years. People want to get rid of us, defund us, for something that happened in Minnesota. Let me know of any other occupation, I'm going to tell you for the officers, where if I go to a dentist up in California and have a bad experience, then I go, I'm not going to any more dentists. But our profession, something happens in Minnesota. What did they do? They come here and burn down our city. Right? The situation happened in St. Louis. They come here and burn down our city. Right? If we do it, by all means, hold us accountable. But that is demoralizing. It is. That's one of the problems as far as that. As far as the certain crimes, they don't prosecute. So here's the thing, I have limited resources. Officers left the department in droves. They have. We're trying to build that back. But the bottom line is this. I'm trying to get presence out there to deal with the shootings, to deal with the homicides and all that kind of thing. If officers are arresting people for minor offenses, which is it going to really solve the problem? Think about it. They're in jail for a couple hours. That officer's off the street for how long? Prosecuting the paper. He's out on the street. They're not going to go forth with it. The officers know that. So what do? Is it more advantageous to have these officers on the street trying to deal with other things, show presence to deter other crimes, or do we deal with the little drinking or whatever the case may be, or do we try to communicate those people and tell them that's not what we're supposed to do, right? But as far as what our plan is, trust me, there's a plan in place. And when I spoke about the 7% reduction, this is comparing last year's stats. 7% reduction, and we're the only one in the city right now that has a reduction compared from their last year's stats. Now, we are leading the city in homicides. We are. Very violent district, but we're not number one as far as assault with dangerous weapons. We're not. Unfortunately, these are very targeted killings, and they're very specific to that individual, right? Knock wood, we haven't had the spraying, thank God. I don't want to jinx us, right? But that's what's going on. But I'd be love to dialogue with you, and later on, I'll give you my email. We'd like to discuss and see what we can do to help try to resolve these issues. But I thank you. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna keep it moving. It's your turn, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Wes. Thank you, Wes. Thank you. How you doing,